So there are a couple of secrets, and one that may appear very, very simple, perhaps too simple for people. However, to practice it takes a lot of focus and willingness, and that has to do with the conscious breath. That we learn to breathe consciously, because when we breathe consciously all the way down into the belly, extending the belly like a big balloon, and back up again, we connect with a still place within us. And that still place is the place where intimacy arises. You know, I cannot be intimate with Freddie or connect intimately with him when I'm all angry, disconnected from myself, outside of myself. It's the last thing what I want to do, connect intimately with Freddie. So the first thing is to come to myself. And what we found, how that, really is easily and quickly achieved, is through breathing consciously, because I have to bring the focus of my thoughts, of my mind, to the breath. Otherwise, I won't be able to breathe into the belly. We all breathe, automatically. Fortunately, otherwise we would not survive. But that happens more in the upper torso, in the chest, which makes us sometimes more anxious and nervous. When we breathe in the belly, we become quiet. I can, notice how I feel instead of being caught up in my feelings. And when I have reconnected with myself like that, I can reconnect with him, because then, my heart is open. And when my heart is open, of course I want to connect with him,
So beautiful. And yes, as a breathwork facilitator, I can advocate the importance of our breath. It's, as you said, it's the only system in our body that is automatic as well as controlled, because if it wasn't automatic, we would die. People are so not conscious about how they breathe, and also perhaps carrying some traumatic experiences from birth and the first breath we took as we arrived to the world. And really to bring the breath down the body to the bottom of the body is number one. So yes, thank you for that.
Yeah, we could lead actually an experience for your viewers. And I'll say just a little bit, and then we can start unpacking what we want to share today, all of us. But the breath is so imperative because it sets us up for the witness, which is then allowing us to be witness to all the total felt sense of what happens in our story, and then how we create what we're creating in our life. So let's do the practice and then start unpacking more of what we want to all share.
Yes, please. I love that.
Okay, great. This isn't going to take too long. So if everybody who's listening and with us now, just your eyes can be open, closed, or soft focus, where you're just looking out the slit of your eyes, not paying a lot of attention or putting energy on whatever you're looking at. And then just bring your awareness to your sit bones, feeling your sit bones on your seat, and the earth supporting the floor, and the floor supporting you. For now, just breathe and enjoy this moment. Follow it with your awareness, your breath coming into your nose, down your trachea, into your lungs, and extending into your diaphragm like a big balloon on your inhalation. Maybe put a hand on your belly just to feel your belly extend into your hand on your inhalation like a big balloon. Following with your awareness, your breath back up and out through your nose in your own pace, depth, and rhythm. Letting your thoughts come, letting your thoughts go. For now, not putting a lot of focus on any interpretations, meaning. Just for now, breathing and being. Feeling the rise of your belly on your inhalation. Flattening of your belly on your exhalation. Letting your thoughts come, letting your thoughts go.
And while you're breathing in and out, take a moment and notice how you're feeling right now. Notice how your body is feeling. Notice any sensations or the absence of sensations. And slowly come back by opening your eyes. And if you could be so kind and share how you may be feeling right now, Yasi.
I feel very grounded, very here, focused and expanded. Thank you for that.
Yeah, that's the beginning. So once we can start to quiet and separate out our thoughts, which oftentimes seem to be all that we are, we can live from and watch from this place of possibility. And that's like our connection to this elegant design that are the stars and the universe, and that we evolved from as single-cell amoebas, multi-celled organisms. And we can start to live into what we want to create. And in this particular instance, more peace and joy around some of the things that have traumatized us. With the Me Too movement and with men's unconsciousness and starting to be more conscious, and the whole earth now, moving towards this consciousness around our sexual energetic self, this practice of the witness is imperative.
Right. Can you elaborate more on the concept of the witness so our audience can get a real sense of what you actually mean when you say witnessing?
Sure. So we're these big brain thinking Homo sapiens. We've been figuring out the universe for millennia. The mind doesn't stop. And typically the mind really, to justify its existence, has to have something to analyze, fix, or make right. And the ego is always right about it's not my fault. So there's always something wrong that we can never do anything about. So to get out of that box, we have to drop into the belly and then be the witness of all that conversation and stuff that's going on, to then start creating what we most deeply desire. And it's like really shifting what we believe is only the way that it can be, which often comes from our experience in the past.
So in our work, we talk about the reintegration of the sexual, emotional, and spiritual. And part of the work is to become aware of where I am in each of these places. If we don't cultivate awareness, we cannot shift. Now, that doesn't apply just to sexual healing or to intimacy cultivation. It applies to any domain in life. I cannot fly to the moon if I don't know what a rocket ship is. I need to have awareness. And so, because all of this lives so much in the space of the subconscious, our sexual self, our emotional self, none of us has training in school, high school, or college around what it means to be sexually aware, or to be emotionally literate, or to be mindful. Now, perhaps mindfulness is taught more now in schools than before, but still, here, what we are talking about, it's the integration of the whole being. And what is most left out is our sexual self. It's, avoided, it's vilified, like, I don't know how it is in your country, but in the United States, we barely have sex education, but intimacy education is totally missing. And then we are so surprised that we have so many breakups of relationships, divorces, because we haven't learned how to cultivate intimacy and love. We just fall into it. But to sustain it, it requires both awareness, we call it certain principles, and then certain daily practices.
And so to continue to say what this witness is, it's the watcher of not just the thought, the total felt sense of the thought, which is what often makes it so real for us. The emotion, the heart beating fast, the sweatiness, or the anxiety. And to witness all of that through just focusing on the breath allows us to a little pause, to step a little bit away from how all of these things and experiences have us, to then move into and slowly move with grace and flow towards what we most deeply desire. What happens, what I've found in my experience and people we've worked with over the years we've been doing this, is that the experiences from the past that so deeply have us start to flatten or become less and less entangled in all of our energetic selves. And then we can keep moving towards what we most deeply desire. But this witness and this belly breath and this watcher, this meditative witness state, it needs to be cultivated with really vigilant practice, because when this thing happens for us, we're so overwhelmed by it that it oftentimes becomes the thing that we keep living.
Right. So it's almost investing in the inner resources. So then when you need to pull it, you've got a whole, it's filled with those resources that you're cultivating.
Precisely.
Yeah, beautiful. And so what is another secret? I know we've been talking about the breath.
Yeah, another secret is that love is not a feeling. Love is a practice. Now, I'm not saying that there are not feelings connected with it, but we are culturally so much in this romantic Hollywood fairy tale way of being that we don't know that love is being generated daily in the way we speak with each other, in the way we connect with each other, in the way we breathe with each other. And while these practices don't have to take long, some of them, just Freddie coming over to my desk and holding me like this from the front and from the back on my heart. And when he comes like that, that is the moment when I pause. I don't just keep going typing something. We have the agreement that when one comes to the other, that we then take a pause. Because in this pause, we connect energetically. We alter the frequency that allows us to not only feel connected, but also to feel love. It arises.
It's like a mini moment meditation. So when she touches or I touch her, and we both agreed to stop for a moment and do the belly breath and be in the witness, we're having a little meditation right there with each other. And we'll get into more of how we teach how to deepen that kind of collective practice.
And then it's not just, what often is reported to us when couples come. We teach workshops both for couples and singles and do private work, is that, where he may say, oh yeah, I would like to have more sex or sex every day, this connection. And she says, yeah, I want to make love to you too. However, I need more time. Intimacy just doesn't live only for me in the bedroom. It's like when we cook dinner, when we talk to each other on the phone. So when we have these tantric connecting practices throughout the day, we are already connected, and that then just moves into a deeper sense of connection in the bedroom or in the lovemaking. So now the question, of course, not only for the couple, but also with oneself. What is another secret with oneself? So another secret is to really drop into the heart space, which is the love space. Because when I drop into my heart space, I can start listening to myself instead of being judgmental or making myself wrong or making Freddie wrong, So I come back to myself. You called it earlier, the source and resource within. It is already there. It's just a thought away. Like that I bring my focus to, oh yeah, let me connect with my heart, where my love, like love, the everlasting love, is within. And so I can become present to myself, and we call it raising our frequency. The lower my frequency is, the more miserable I feel. I feel sorry for myself, I complain, or I become aggressive. And these are all human emotions. There's nothing good or bad about it. The question is, do I want to hang out in it? So then the other secret is to connect with my inner love so that I can become love and I can listen to myself.
So beautifully said. And even by showing this gesture, as you place your hand on your heart, it's already bringing all your awareness to that space. So it's really a good practice to remember to simply place the hand on the heart and really have that direct connection. So beautiful.
Yeah, for the last 20 years or so, we've been teaching these practices of it's a way of like sexual meditation. And I know that word is loaded because there's been such gross abuse in the intimacy in the world over the millennia. And women are now coming into their power. And one of the biggest powers women have is that sexual power. And yet there's been such a gross negligence on the part of the male patriarchy in the world. For the man in our practices and what our beliefs are is that the man is in the process of having to become more conscious of his sexual unconsciousness. So forever, men have been lauded for their sexual prowess, harems and playboy, and you're a man when you have sex, and in the locker room, the more you have, the more man you are, and we start feeling ourselves there. Look from day one, Mom, look, no hands, a little kid with the erection, and we're run by the little head our whole life. So for the man in the tantric practices and all the variations there are, and we're Tantra Nova, Tantra Nu, so we're integrating some of the East and the Western practices of transformational awareness, is for the man to learn how to separate ejaculation from orgasm. And that's not just to become a better lover, and yes, it will affect that. It's to really uncouple how unconscious this energy is for us. And as Elspeth mentioned earlier, he's wanting to connect and want more sex, and she's like, I do too, but can you kiss me with your heart? And that's what men learn to do in this practice of sexual consciousness.
Yeah, this is really great that you bring this up. So we look at the relational model that we all have lived in for millennia as a hierarchical model, like patriarchy is a hierarchical model. So one is up and one is down. And it used to be males who were up for millennia, not just recently. And the opportunity to shift out of a hierarchical model into a horizontal model, like an infinity loop, so that this shifts into that from which we can listen to each other, speak to each other. In this model, the one who is up doesn't need to listen to the one who is down, because the world as it occurs to the one who is up, it's the only world. So how men have looked at sexuality, how men have looked at love, how men have looked at the world was all from that myopic point of view. Now, I also want to bring this into the context of that is what the consciousness has been. It's still around, and we women, we have been part of the consciousness. It's not that just men did it to us. Why didn't women vote earlier in the United States than 100 years ago? Why did women need the husband's signature to get a credit card in the 1960s in the United States? It's unthinkable now, but to see that we women were part of the system, of the model. And now in the awakening, and I feel like we have just moved this far to 1 o'clock and 7 o'clock, now let's move all the way. And this is where it requires consciousness in both. Like we women learn to speak up, have our voice first and foremost, noticing within myself what I want. Stepping out, as you called it, out of victimhood into what do I want? What requests do I want to make? And that at times takes courage, where we just don't look for, being at the effect of someone who says what's to be done. The other thing, the other skill set that needs to be developed is listening. As I said earlier, who's at the top doesn't need to listen. It's not needed. So here, both of us want to be able to listen, fully listen. Not listen like, oh, when can I finally speak? No, fully listen. what goes on for him or what goes on for her. And then at some moment to speak my voice. Both needs to be cultivated. They're very particular skill sets in order to create fulfillment within and parity in relationship where both can express and be in their fullest self. There are three skill sets. One is listening and speaking. The second one is following and leading. So it takes a whole new form of leadership, where leadership is not up. No, there is one leading at some moment, the other follows. And then the next moment, the second one leads and the first follows. And it keeps going. And it's this, horizontal infinity loop. The third skill set is that we learn to receive and give. Receiving is, for some women, also for men, a huge challenge because it calls for trusting. So we want to learn to receive and learn to give. Some people feel very comfortable in giving because then they are in control. So giving without the control thing and then the receiving. So this is when you speak about the consciousness of the man to rise, is really, and he does this, what you said, separating ejaculation from orgasm, which is the place where a man gets the opportunity to become not only more conscious of his wonderful testosterone, powerful energy, to guide it up into his heart. By that, he actually becomes more connected within himself, and he starts listening more to himself instead of just being in action.
Yeah, beautiful. I love that infinity way of blending the energies, right?
Yes.
It's a good place to maybe speak about the differences between the masculine and the feminine energies.
Yeah. Well, there is a big difference. For men, we, as I mentioned earlier, start feeling ourselves in the second chakra, and for the women, it's in the heart chakra. And two, so sexually to come together, one has to, move the energy. So for the man who usually feels it first, and it has the testosterone and usually moving forward, for him to learn to bring that energy to the heart and then meet her at her heart, and then the sexual section chakra can open. For her, right. So, for the man, in that learning consciousness around the ejaculatory reflex starts to bring consciousness to that automatic propensity to, what appears as lust or selfish love when he approaches his beloved with the heart on all the time. And for her, it can feel like an intrusion. It's like it's just too soon. It's like, where's the water and where's the flowers and where's the, just the hello. So that slows the man down. And that starts to also uncouple the yin-yang balance, we call it, for the man to start to bring more consciousness to how can he be more connected to his feminine side, his masculine side, and because there's got to be that polarity. So within relationship, that polarity shifts around. So how in relationship can you be more in your feminine when she's in more her masculine, and more in your masculine when she's more in her feminine, and play with those intertwinement. One of the things that we've been teaching for the last 18 years is how to work with our sexual energetic self to become more deeply connected to a lot of these unconscious automaticities. Like the belly breath led us into the witness and starting to be observant of the total felt sense of that energy flowing and the thoughts. So too does the sexual awareness and what happens in that. So whether you're doing our work or not, when we're in our sexual energy, we're more open, loving, vulnerable, receptive. Chemically, we're changed. Oxytocin's released, endorphins, serotonin, the feel-good hormones. So our body's in a chemical state of ease. Our emotions are in an open, loving place. And that's what I call the systemic intelligence, this sexual energetic activation. So that's what happens anyway. So when you start learning some of the specific distinctions that we teach in this work, align with an intention, like with the belly breath, we get more connected to the seeing of what we don't see about how to get to where we want to get with flow and ease.
Yeah. I also want to expand a little bit on the feminine and masculine, the yin and the yang, because this doesn't just play out in heterosexual relationships. It is in every relationship. Heterosexual, homosexual, bisexual, transgender relationship. There's always a dynamic of that yin and yang. If that is not there, there's no magnetism. And sometimes we need to cultivate that magnetism. Like, for example, when I'm more in my masculine, around the business, I can easily drop into my masculine because then I'm intentional, I'm planning, like the linear self, which has its place. Yet when I want to connect with Freddie, I want to drop into my yin self, opening up, letting go. Now, that doesn't mean that in lovemaking I couldn't become more the one who's the giving one. So we play, it's like playing the piano on different registers. And I want to be very clear that this, what Freddie shared, applies also to same-sex couples. There's usually one that is more in their masculine or the yang energy. They actually start feeling it in their sexual center, just as Freddie described it. For the men, can be a woman. And the other in the relationship, if it's a lesbian relationship, then she wants to connect first with the heart, because that is where she starts feeling connected. So just to be very clear that this is applicable to any relationship, even the relationships we have at work, while we may not be sexual there, but that plays into the way how we communicate, how we work together, how we coordinate together. And so it's really good to know about that.
Yes, thank you. And the feminine and masculine is, of course, the essence that we carry within each and every one of us. And we do need them both, as you said. And they also having their specific dance between them, and can change in different times of the day, depends on what we're doing, in different times of our moon cycle, or throughout life, and different roles that we take. And it is about nurturing them both, knowing that, they work together. And we need to keep that polarity with our beloveds to have the attraction, because if there's no polarity, there's no attraction. I'm sure I'm sure you know about it. No question.
Yes. Yes.
How do you cultivate that polarity? How do you actually drop into your your most dominant essence, and of course for you as a woman it's feminine, and for you as a man the masculine, and how do you create that polarity so you can feel that magnetism for each other?
Yeah, it's an ongoing process. It's like the breathing we started at the beginning, and being in the witness of whatever's going on. Because at the beginning, when we're zygotes in the womb, we're androgynous. And then it's decided we're masculine or feminine, more estrogen, more testosterone, one or the other. And as we age, the whole process reverses itself, men grow breasts and women grow hair on their faces. So, the whole thing reverses. But what we're talking about is how, as adults, can we integrate that masculine feminine dynamic as exists as we live. So for instance, Elsbeth is pretty more in her masculine in the business, and I'm probably more in my feminine. But what happens is when we get, and sometimes there's anger from me about that, or anger from her about that I'm not more in my masculine in business, or that she's too much in her masculine in the business. And then when we come to the bedroom, we might bring some of that negative energy with us about from where we were previously in the workplace. So it's about how can we get connected to whatever that disconnect is, and get reconnected. And then from there, be in the love space, however it shows up, whether she's more masculine or I'm more my feminine or vice versa, that we can then, enjoy. So it's always a process of being conscious, and that's always the opportunity. There's no right or wrong. that we are in flow and how it is in the moment.
I would like to share a little bit about the healing process in our work, because out of my own healing, I decided to share that with other women, with other men, and with couples. So as Freddie said, we both came out of corporate America. I was a management consultant in the 90s, and I had gotten really good at that. However, I was really suffering in relationship, very unhappy, because I attracted unavailability. And it had gone like a theme through my life. And when I arrived at that point again, I was very much in love with a man who was married. And I felt so despaired. And I then got very afraid that if I were not going to produce a shift within myself, that I would end up, leaving this planet without ever having experienced lasting intimacy and love. I mean, I had experienced love and intimacy, but not lasting. And so that was the moment when I decided to delve deeply into meditation and then Tantra. And it was so impactful for me, because what I discovered through the Tantric healing, there's a very particular intimate healing that we call Yoni Ritual. And the Yoni is the sacral center of the woman, from Sanskrit, translated into sacred space. And what I discovered through that healing was that I had held distrust towards men. I didn't know about that because I was quite charming with men. You wouldn't have been able to tell that there was underneath, but it was underneath. And it related back, which also came out in the healing, to the time when I was 18 years old. First boyfriend, first love, and then first intercourse. He and I, we just had spent a couple of beautiful years in bliss and, connecting and petting. And it was really blissful. And then he asked me to have intercourse. And I agreed. I don't think I was ready, but I agreed. And it was very, very painful. I had to go to the gynecologist, and then the bill went to my house. My dad opened it, and all hell broke loose. And the boyfriend left shortly after. So at that time, I felt so alone and so not understood. My dad called me a whore when I told him that I wanted to, split the gynecological bill with my boyfriend. And, you don't allow yourself to be paid for that. So it was just like, so, I don't know, I felt so by myself and not, and that was the time when I put an armor around my yoni, my sexual self. And my heart too, yes. And I had dealt with it further in therapy in my 30s, and which was really good because there was someone who was listening to me and supported me. So I thought it was all gone. But what I did not know about was that there was a memory on the cellular level that I couldn't access from my conscious mind. So talking about it in therapy didn't access that. However, in that ritual, that sacred ritual, when I was touched actually in my yoni, the memory came up, and with it, that excruciating, pain, emotional pain, physical pain. It was like a valve that opened. At first it gets more intense, and then it fizzles out. And this is how it was for me, literally. And in place, once that was cleared, self-trust arose, and then more trust in men in general. And then 6 months later, Freddie Centaur came into my life. So while I grew up with, a lot of vilification around feminine sexuality and feeling humiliated as a young woman, at home, that all could get healed. Because earlier you said, most women had some abuse, sexual, emotional, molestation or, just not being appreciated and respected. And to heal that, and there are different levels of healing and different severities of events that happened. While I didn't get sexually abused, like, explicitly, but there was not the context for being introduced to that beautiful experience in a sacred way. And I didn't know, how to do it. If I would do it over again, given what I know now, would be very different, at 18 years old. So teaching 18-year-old women would be really great.
And I want to say the flip side of that, abuse for men is the unconsciousness that we have come to think of as, being a man. The unconsciousness of, the harder you are, the more women you have, the more aggressive you are, all of that. And in some places it had its time. And this is the paradigm shift that's happening now in the world for us to continue to expand our consciousness and seeing ourselves and each other. This is just what's happening. So it's becoming, the old is becoming the new.
There's one other thing I want to point out, because sometimes it's not so explicit like the hard-on. We call it leaking energy, where there is, like energy spread while, just like in affairs or so, or even in work relationship, where we are not, and it goes both ways, not just men, but also women, But
confusion starts.
Yeah, where we are not aware that we actually lead with our sexual seductive energy, or like our romantic, So
what happens is we've been taught to stuff it down or either be unconscious as opposed to being alive with it and focus it up, transmute it.
But there hasn't been consciousness, so nobody could teach us.
Exactly. That's what we're here for.
Yeah, that's what you are here for, not we are here for, is to bring awareness to that. And it's often very subtle, very, very subtle, where if I point it out to someone, they would say, what are you talking about? And unless I can show them, like the actions they take, or the words they use, because it comes out in some way. Once we have developed the sensibility for noticing it, we can make it visible. Because otherwise it's difficult if people don't have a sense for energy, because we cannot see energy or hear energy. So we can say, what? What are you talking about? Nothing.
What's nice is to be activated by some sort of flirtation and feel the energy of that flirtation and then breathe it up to the heart. And there's nothing inappropriate or anything you have to do with it other than just be alive in the feeling of it. We could teach these practices to nuns and priests if they were vowed to celibacy, and it would enliven their practice of spiritual, practice. This is what we're saying in terms of sexual consciousness. I can't think of anything more spiritually connected than creating life and being in a pleasure place about this life, being creative. And yet this energy, which had, was creating life before we had language, is so vilified. So it's like the quantum shift that has to happen for us to make that other quantum shift everywhere else. It's the consciousness and the acceptance of our sexual energetic selves. And for many, it does have to become, it's like it is now. There's so much porn and not making any of that wrong, and so much unconsciousness, the Me Too movement, and so much that we're seeing, and so much up to here that it's like the cup has to flow over before it can change. It's like, so yeah, it's all shifting. It's all heading in the right direction, I think.
Right. Yeah. And I want to point out that our sexuality is very different from sex, right? Because sex is the physical act of it, and it's perhaps the meeting of the genitals and all that it involves. But our sexuality is our aliveness. It's our force, creative energy. This is what brings us to live our passions, our desires, our connections with the divine self and the divine. So
if you can't really, if we aren't able to take what that sexual energy and sexuality are as a combined energetic piece, then we encapsulate it and we get confused and we suppress and we overcompensate as opposed to, again, being alive in the sexual energy with the sexuality and it being a part of our lives and how we're living. Again, you can be vowed to celibacy and still be a very sexually alive person.
Exactly.
Not, so.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Also to come to sexual consciousness, like consciousness of that wonderful life-giving energy that is life force. Without it, none of us would be sitting here and speaking together. So is that we really, because, sometimes people say, what do you mean by sexual consciousness? Is that often what it takes is that how unconsciousness gets access is through tapping into the feelings that are connected with it. And the feelings and emotions are guilt, fear, embarrassment, and shame. So in the process, what may happen is that we may have to face these discomforts, because it's not comfortable to feel shame. It's not comfortable to feel guilt. And like for many men, it's that also in the context of Me Too, is that guilt has come up, or fear. How can I be now if that is no longer appropriate? I did that all along. I didn't even know that it was wrong. Now I cannot even talk to a woman anymore. So it's both moving through our fears and shame and guilt, so that we can come out on the other side. And on one hand, it's really happening on the individual level. Unless I clear it here, I cannot clear it in my relationship. Now, the relationship may be very supportive in lifting me up to feel my shame. But what's required is that I have a partner who is willing to go there with me, who is willing to hold space for me, like so that I can go through the eye of the needle. If he has his own guilt and shame, it may be more difficult. So what I want to point out here, it's like the work is cut out for men and women and anything in between.
I totally agree. I totally agree with that. We all in that threshold where we need to make different choices and take responsibility for our life and what are we going to do about it and how we're moving forward. And that includes going to the uncomfortable places that we all have and processing them. And it is in relationship that we hurt, and it is in relationship that we heal. So having that supportive relationship, as you said, with a partner that is there to hold space, to not take things personally when the other is going through their own healing journey, whatever it takes, to just be that safe container.
Yeah. Also,
it's all an inside job.
I also want to be clear that if we don't have a partner, because when I started out my healing journey, I was not in relationship. Freddie was not in my life yet. So I went to do the work by myself and got the support from a practice partner, which can be at certain moments life changing, life supporting. So just for all, if you're single and listen here, there is healing possible for you, either in relationship or, in a practice relationship. And then there's also the practices that we can do by ourselves that allow us to heal. I just, finished a 3-day weekend retreat with women only this last weekend, and it was so gratifying to see how these women came out on the other side through their own healing, of course, supported in a circle of women that is that feminine. It's like a doula being supported by doulas. So just there are many varieties in which we can heal. So I wanted just to give hope to everyone who is listening. You can find the right form for yourself.
Yeah, I was going to say that even in being single, doing your own work, you'll create the beloved, if that's what you choose, that really fits and really works for you. It'll be different from anything before. So don't think because something happened in the past in a relationship that it's doomed to happen again. Not through your own transformation. And when that happens, and as that happens, and it is in process, then and you will be creating the beloved of your deepest desire.
Right. So it's really a great opportunity if you are single to cultivate this most important relationship, which is with yourself, and change the frequency and the vibration that you vibrate, so you actually call in the right partner into your life, if that's what you need.
Yes, beautiful.
Right, exactly.
Yeah. And of course, having women supporting women, this is also in my work, I've been witnessing it again and again and again, how important it is to be supported by our sisters, and how sisterhood is such an important, again, safe container that elevates us wherever we are. So, yeah, maybe you want to say anything about that woman togetherness that creates magic.
Sisterhood.
Yes, yes, and also the healing that can arise just out of the energy. So I do with the women this energetic healing ritual where one gives to the other woman and the other one is the receiver. It's a closed ritual. It's not per se sexual, and it may, be about clearing some shame around her yoni center, her sexual being, or clearing a molestation in prior years. And it could be an emotional thing, like being in sadness all the time. And because when we live in sadness all the time, the heart starts to suffer. The physical heart, the emotional heart, the spiritual heart. So this is back to the support by women. It's like that one receives, the other gives. It's just like the women who give are just there. They just listen. Yes, there's some guidance in how to move with the energy and how to be with the receiver. But it's out of that supportive being there, without expectation, without any agenda, that then the world for the receiver can clear, and then she can call in how she wants to feel, what she wants to experience. So from sadness to love, or from resentment to pure joy. And each woman sets this out for herself, what she wants to let go. We do some process work so it gets really clear what no longer serves from the past, so she can let that go. We call it like, let it fly into Lake Michigan, and Lake Michigan, recycles it to bring something beautiful about, and then bringing in the new self. Freddie also has a workshop for men only, because it's so essential for men to come into consciousness, aware, and connect with their emotional self.
Yeah, that's a big piece for men, because men are either fucking or fighting. That's kind of the two emotions that are like, okay. And that's kind of how we're socialized and how we're modeled. The little boy comes to the dad crying, and the dad says, come back and talk to me when you can be a man. The little girl comes crying, and he says, oh, darling, what's wrong? So women are much more supported to be emotionally, Vesuvius improvisational, and much more flexible. And a lot of that's physical design. Women are really designed to listen internally for the baby, with the baby, and so on. But the cognation is just quicker for women, left brain, right brain, emotional and linear, analytical. So for men in the tantric practices, learning emotional awareness, emotional breath. So there's a lot of that going on in the men's workshop, and also team building, and also there's a camaraderie that is developed, or not developed, it's really uncovered through a lot of the practices that we have in the workshop. So for men to see that, wow, we're not so different, and there's so much for all of us to keep expanding, and that to hear what happens when they go back to their partners, or those who aren't, but their dreams and what they're most deeply desired wishes start to happen for them. It's really a wonderful feeling to see these practices at work.
Yeah. And also, I think through the emotional work you do with them, is that they drop more into vulnerability.
Yeah, there's an unmasking there.
Everyone avoids as much as possible.
And particularly men.
Yes.
Very guarded.
Yes. Yeah, men have became to believe that vulnerability is weakness, whereas actually vulnerability is strength. Right?
And in the past, in the world, there's good reason for it in the past. And yet, moving forward, we're creating a new world every moment. So to shift what has been so, to create what is so, and to create further what we want to deeply, manifest is possible. Clear intention, it's been said, clear intention with elevated emotion changes matter. And it's so true.
Right on.
So,
yeah,
I'm very inspired by, we are attracting actually more and more younger people, not just people in their 40s and 50s, often in their 20s and 30s, and the guys who show up, and they want to learn both about their sexual self and, how they can channel their energy. Perhaps in the relationship, they are quick comers. That may be the entry point, but then they open up to their emotional self. And imagine young men learning that, not just when you are 50 and 60, when you may open up emotionally a little bit more anyway, because testosterone drops and the relationship between testosterone and estrogen changes. So many men actually connect more to their emotions in their late 50s and 60s. Having this show up, that openness, in young men.
It's a breath of fresh air.
Yes,
and the listening, and very inspiring.
Very inspiring, and indeed, brings more hope in the face of humanity.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. And I always think that how come they come to this old couple, teaching couple, and I mean, I'm 70, Freddie is 63, and
you look so great.
We feel good.
So, and I think, wow, if I can share something with them that they want, wow, I feel so like, I just want to keep going until I'm 90, and I will.
20 minutes still singing. He's 92.
Yeah, so anyway, just like to, complete on a more, on a very inspirational note, that there are really like sprouts and already little, flowers, germination of that new consciousness that shows up, while the whole world, I think, is still in this place, but there are some openings, and so grateful to you and to ourselves, that we contribute to this opening.
It's no doubt it's a critical mass of consciousness that has to happen now. We're full up now. It's time for, and it is, and you see it everywhere. If it's anywhere, it's everywhere. And it's wonderful to be on your show and see what other folks are bringing on and the changes that are happening in the world. It's good stuff.